I want you to try something for me, just for a second. Close your eyes and imagine the ground beneath your feet. It feels solid, right? Unshakable. Now, imagine a low rumble, a vibration that starts deep down and makes you realize that the concrete you're standing on isn't bedrock, it's just a thin layer over something moving.
Wow. Yeah, that's a pretty terrifying image to start us off with.
It is, but it's intentional. Because that sense of vertigo, that slight nausea, that is exactly what our source material today suggests we should be feeling about the state of the world in 2026.
It feels appropriate. We're living through a moment where the geopolitical tectonic plates, to borrow a phrase from the analysis, are shifting violently.
Exactly. We're talking about the end of the world order we all grew up with, the rules, the borders, the treaties, the things we thought were permanent.
Yeah.
It turns out they might just be temporary suggestions. And with the political shifts we're seeing, specifically with the U.S. presidency here in 2026, those suggestions are being, well, ignored.
And the big question is, if the old rule book is being thrown in the fire, what are we writing in its place? Chaos or something else?
To answer that, we are doing a deep dive today into a fascinating, slightly alarming discussion from the BBC's The Global Story. We're unpacking insights from Jeremy Bowen. Now, for those who don't know, Bowen isn't just a pundit.
No, not at all.
He's the international editor at the BBC, and he's been on the front lines of conflicts for, 4 decades?
Right. When a guy who has covered wars in the Middle East, the Balkans and beyond says, this is the most dangerous moment I've seen, you stop scrolling, you listen.
So here's our mission for this deep dive. We are going to trace the life cycle of the rules-based international order. We need to figure out why we built it, who broke it, and what happens now that the United States, under the new administration, seems ready to just walk away from the whole project.
And to do that, we can't start in 2026. We have to hop in the time machine. We're going back to 1943.
Okay, picture the scene. The Second World War is still raging. It's the bloodiest conflict in human history. And amidst all that, Winston Churchill shows up at Harvard University.
A surprising location for a British prime minister during wartime, yeah.
Right. But he's there to accept an honorary degree, and he gives this speech. Now, usually wartime speeches are about fighting on the beaches or blood, toil, tears, and sweat. But this one was different. He was looking past the war.
He was terrified of what would happen next. Churchill knew that the United States had this tendency toward isolationism. He was afraid the Americans would help win the war and then just say, job done, and go home.
Go back across the Atlantic. So he's standing there at Harvard, basically pleading with the future. He says the U.S. cannot just withdraw. He calls for a world council.
Which sounds like something out of a Marvel movie.
It does. But he meant a precursor to the United Nations Security Council. He wanted a structure where the great powers would sit around a table and hash things out so they didn't have to blow each other up every 20 years.
And it's crucial to understand the vibe of that moment. Churchill wasn't being some, starry-eyed idealist. He was looking at a world that was absolutely shattered. The League of Nations, which was the first try at this after World War I, had failed miserably. It didn't stop Hitler. It didn't stop Mussolini.
So the stakes were existential. And when the war finally ended in 1945, the reality on the ground was even worse than Churchill had feared.
Oh, Europe was a graveyard. It was bankrupt. Cities were rubble. And specifically, the British Empire, which had been the global policeman for a century, was running on fumes. They were financially ruined.
Meanwhile, across the ocean, the United States is the last giant standing. Their factories are humming, their cities are intact, they are the new titan.
Exactly. And this brings us to a really uncomfortable truth that the source highlights. We tend to look back at the founding of the UN and the Marshall Plan with these rose-colored glasses. We think, oh, how noble. America rebuilt the world out of the goodness of its heart.
And you're saying that's a myth?
I'm saying it's incomplete. Bowen points out that this system wasn't built on altruism. It was built on hard-nosed self-interest.
How so?
Well, think about it. The U.S. had this massive industrial engine. They needed people to buy their Fords and their washing machines. You can't sell washing machines to people who are living in ruins.
Right. They needed stable markets.
They needed a stable, wealthy Europe to trade with. It was an investment. But there was an even bigger motivator than money. Fear.
The Soviet Union.
The inexorable rise of communism.
Yeah.
By 1947, relations between the West and the Soviets were just falling apart. The Cold War was starting. And the U.S. realized that if they didn't stabilize Europe, the Soviets would.
And this leads to the moment where the baton truly passes, 1947. Britain essentially taps out.
They sent a cable to the U.S. State Department. It basically said, we're broke. We can't support Greece and Turkey anymore. We can't police the world. It's your turn.
And that is when President Harry Truman steps up.
Enter the Truman Doctrine. This is a massive pivot point in history. Truman went to Congress and basically said, it is now the policy of the United States to support free peoples who are resisting attempted subjugation.
That's a very fancy way of saying we are the world police now.
It really was. It formalized America's role as the global guarantor of security. This doctrine is the seed that grows into the Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe, and then in 1949, NATO, the military alliance that has defined the West ever since.
Okay, so we have the blueprint. The U.S. builds a system of rules, alliances, institutions like the UN, the IMF, the World Bank. The deal was, we, the U.S., will protect you and keep the sea lanes open, and in exchange, you follow our rules and buy our stuff.
A simplified version, but yeah, essentially correct. It was a Pax Americana.
But here's the thing. Listeners are probably thinking, okay, that's great history, but did it actually work? Because looking at the news today, it feels like those rules are imaginary.
Sure.
Was there ever a time when this rules-based order actually functioned the way it was supposed to?
It's a valid skepticism. But Jeremy Bowen points to one specific moment as the proof of concept, the high watermark of the whole system.
We're jumping forward now, 1990. The Cold War is ending, the Soviet Union is collapsing, and in the Middle East, Saddam Hussein decides to invade his neighbor, Kuwait.
This was a textbook violation of international law. I mean, you can't just roll tanks across a border and claim another country as your 19th province. It was a blatant act of aggression.
Now, the U.S. president at the time is George H.W. Bush, and his response is fascinating compared to what we might expect today.
Right. Bush Sr. was, as the source puts it, a rules-based order guy. He was a former UN ambassador. He believed in the system.
So he didn't just send in the Marines immediately?
No. He played it by the book. He went to the United Nations. He worked the phones. He built this massive coalition of countries. He wasn't acting like a cowboy. He was acting like a sheriff, gathering a posse.
And he was looking for something specific. Chapter 7 resolution? Can we pause on that? What does that actually mean?
Good catch. So under the UN Charter, military force is illegal. You can't just attack someone. There are only 3 exceptions. 1, self-defense. 2, if a country invites you to help them. Or 3, a Chapter 7 resolution from the UN Security Council.
That's the golden ticket?
Exactly. In the international community, legally authorizing the use of force to restore peace. And Bush got that resolution.
He got the stamp of approval.
He did. And when the U.S. deployed that massive ring of steel to Saudi Arabia and then pushed Saddam out of Kuwait, they did it with the full weight of international law behind them. It wasn't just American power, it was legal power.
It sounds almost quaint now, doesn't it? A world where everyone agrees on the rules, follows the process, and the bad guy gets punished legally.
It was a system functioning exactly as Truman and Churchill had imagined it. But if 1990 was the peak, the slide down the other side was steep.
And according to the analysis, that slide starts in earnest in 2003.
The invasion of Iraq.
This is the pivot, the sequel, if you will. But in this version, the U.S. tries to do the Bush Sr. thing again. They go to the UN to get a resolution to attack Saddam again.
But this time the world said no. The evidence wasn't there. France famously threatened to veto. There was no consensus.
But George W. Bush, the son, he went ahead anyway. And that is the original sin of the modern era, according to Bowen. When the architect of the rules decides to break them because they are inconvenient, the whole foundation cracks.
I remember UN Secretary General Kofi Annan explicitly calling it illegal later on.
He did. And the consequences weren't just legal debates in New York. It unleashed a catastrophe on the ground. Bowen calls it a Pandora's box. The invasion shattered the Iraqi state, created a vacuum, and out of that chaos rose al-Qaeda in Iraq, which eventually morphed into ISIS.
It's the ultimate you break it, you buy it scenario. But the damage went beyond the Middle East. It damaged the idea of the West. If the U.S. doesn't follow the law, why should Russia? Why should China?
And we see the echoes of that breakdown right now. The source draws a direct line from 2003 to the conflict in Gaza today.
It describes Gaza as a textbook case of the system failing. You have allegations of severe international law violations by all parties.
The details there are pretty stark. We have the International Criminal Court, the ICC actually issuing arrest warrants.
Right. They issued warrants for the Israeli Prime Minister, the former defense minister, and the senior leadership of Hamas. Now, strictly speaking, that is the system trying to work. It's the law saying No one is above the rules.
But does it matter if the U.S. says we don't recognize this court and the people with the guns ignore the warrants? Is it just theater?
That's the tragedy of it. The legal mechanisms are spinning their gears, issuing warrants, calling out war crimes. But without the political will and the backing of the great powers, specifically the U.S., the system looks toothless.
This leads us to the cynic's view, and honestly, I think a lot of listeners might be nodding along with this. Was this order ever actually real? Or was it just a nice cover story for Western domination?
That is the ultimate criticism. And Jeremy Bowen, who is a realist, he admits the system was always deeply imperfect. The critique is that these were Western rules.
Rules for thee, but not for me.
Exactly.
Huh.
They were applied strictly to adversaries like Saddam in 1990 or Milosevic in the Balkans, but they were ignored when it came to friends of the West, or when the West itself wanted to act.
So it was hypocritical.
In many ways, yes. But, and this is a massive but, Bowen argues that even an imperfect system provided a framework. It provided a baseline of stability. You knew that if you crossed a line, there was at least a mechanism to hold you accountable.
A standard to aspire to.
A standard, yes. And that brings us to 2026. The standard isn't just being ignored, it's being dismantled. We have President Trump back in office. And the source argues this isn't just more of the same hypocrisy, this is a fundamental shift.
It is. Previous leaders might have broken the rules in secret while praising them in public. They felt the need to pretend. The analysis suggests Trump has no interest in the pretense. He views the international institutions not as assets, but as burdens.
There's a specific policy name mentioned in the source material for this new 2026 approach, the Dunroe Doctrine.
Right. It's a play on the old Monroe Doctrine. It's a turning inward. The focus is heavily on the Western Hemisphere. Secure the borders, secure the immediate neighborhood, and let the rest of the world manage itself.
Which leaves Europe in a very, very awkward position.
Awkward is putting it mildly. The source describes Europe as a bystander in decline. I mean, think about it. Europe is an economic giant, but politically, it's disunited. And militarily, it has been dependent on American protection for 80 years.
This is the freeloader argument we hear so much.
And Trump loves that argument. But here's the thing. He's not the only one. Obama complained about free riders. Bush complained about it. Americans have been asking for decades. Why do we pay for Europe's defense while they have universal health care and we don't?
It's a potent political point.
It is. But now the bill has come due. The consensus that American security means European security is dead.
So if the U.S. pulls back and the global policeman hangs up the badge and locks the station door, what fills the vacuum?
That is the million-dollar question.
Some theorists say we're just going back to the 19th century. Spheres of influence.
Right. The theory is the U.S. controls the Americas. China controls Asia. Russia controls its near abroad. And everyone else just falls in line behind their local boss.
It sounds simple. Tidy, even.
But Jeremy Bowen argues that is a total fantasy. It doesn't work in 2026.
Why not? We love simple maps.
Because the world has changed too much. You can't just carve up the map like it's a colonial cake anymore. Look at India.
Yeah, let's talk about India. In the 19th century, they were the jewel in the crown of the British Empire. They were subjects. They did what London told them to do.
No. India is a superpower in waiting. Over 1 billion people, a nuclear power, a tech giant. Do you think New Delhi is going to just accept being in China's sphere or America's sphere?
Absolutely not.
They want their own sphere. And they aren't the only ones. Brazil, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, these are regional powers with their own agendas. They aren't going to take orders from Washington or Beijing.
So the spheres of influence model fails because there are too many spheres.
Exactly. It's too crowded. So if you can't have a rules-based order because the U.S. has checked out, and you can't have clean spheres of influence because the world is too messy, what do you have left?
This brings that vertigo back. Bowen's verdict is one word: chaos.
Chaos.
He is very clear on this. Without the safety net of rules and customs, we enter a might-is-right atmosphere.
The law of the jungle. The strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must.
It is. And for a business, for a traveler, for a regular family, that is a nightmare. It means trade routes aren't safe. It means contracts might not be honored. It means borders can move overnight.
Bowen has a very memorable line about this, doesn't he?
He does. He says that while a chaotic world guarantees job security for foreign correspondents like him, it is a source of great worry for anyone who just wants a peaceful life.
That really hits home. We are moving from a flawed system, one that was often hypocritical, yes, to a lack of any system at all.
And that is the provocative thought we need to sit with. We spent years criticizing the American-led order for being arrogant, for being selectively applied, for being Western. And those criticisms were right.
Now that it's gone.
Now we have to ask, do we miss the hypocrisy of the old order when faced with the raw reality of the new one? Is a bad policeman better than no policeman at all?
That's a heavy question.
It is. We've gone from Truman, who built a structure to hold back the chaos, to a moment where we seem to be inviting the chaos back in.
So what does this all mean for you, listening right now? It means the map you have in your head, the one where you can hop on a plane anywhere, buy goods from anywhere, trust that borders are real, that map needs updating.
It suggests we need to pay very close attention to how our own regions are realigning. If the global referee is gone, the local players are going to start making their own rules.
A jagged map for a jagged new world. It's a lot to process, and it might make you feel a little unsteady on your feet, but that's the reality of 2026.
Indeed. It's a time for keeping your eyes open.
We're going to leave it there for this deep dive. Thanks for listening, and thanks for letting us guide you through the chaos.
Take care.